Good day, learners. Welcome to Biology with Omotayo. Nice having you back on board. Thank you for always connecting. Thank you for always participating in this class. Thank you for always loving our content, liking it, and sharing it. A quick one. We'll be going into classes with regards to the cell. Last class, we began looking at the cell as a topic, and it was equally highlighted during that class that this session will be guided by a couple of subtopics. Firstly, introduction, which we had last class. Afterward, forms in which living things exist is to come next. Okay, after forms in which living things exist, we will now be moving on to cell structure and functions, and then differences between plants and animal cell. So for this class today, we will begin by looking at forms in which living things exist. Forms in which living things exist. The last class, we did justice to basics definition with regards to what a cell is, and summarily put, cell is said to be the basic structural functional unit of life. Also, last class, we tried looking at what a living thing is, and we were able to highlight a couple of basic things that a thing must possess before it can be regarded as being living. Aside just characteristics of living things, yes, not just Mr. Niger D. In fact, now we make use of Mr. Niger Dak. Not just that. There are several other basic things to be examined before a conclusion is reached that a thing is living. Also, in the course of rounding up last class, we identified a couple of unique details with regards to the cell. A few of it was said that very class that the smallest cell is the mycoplasma. It's a bacterium. We equally went on to say the largest cell is the egg of an ostrich. While in human, the largest cell is actually the ova. Yes, that's the egg from a female human. And the smallest cell is sperm cell, while the longest cell is the nerve cell. We went on to look at a few other things, scientists that worked on the cell and the cell theory. So please go back and revisit the last video to acquire required detail and knowledge with regards to all these aspects that have been treated. And so today we'll be starting with forms in which cell exists, and I'll be picking on the first one. Okay, cells, or living things rather, forms in which living things exist. So, and I'll be picking on the first one. Living things, some exist as independent organisms. Okay, some exist as independent organisms. These are free living organisms, okay, like amoeba, paramecium, euglena, Climadomonas, and so on, that exist at the level of a singular cell and exist as singular cell independently and carries out all activities associated with a living thing. Just as I said, independent organism. Okay, and I mentioned a few of them. Quickly, we'll be moving on, but before we do, just like I mentioned a few examples, we'll just look at a diagram of a few. Probably, let's pick amoeba. That is the simplest and the commonest of all. Yes, amoeba. The amoeba is always referred to as a shapeless organism. It does not really matter how you choose to draw it. It's a shapeless organism. Okay, so as you can see, I've done my diagram. And then remember, in biology, there must be a title. Next, we need to identify the organelles in this very organism. Next, I'll be labeling my organism. And already, you must have been told from previous exposure to biology that when labeling your organism, your line must be drawn using a ruler and you are to label horizontally, and this is exactly what I will be doing. Okay, right on the board I have diagram of an amoeba fully labeled. Now, as you can see, we have the nucleus that controls all activities of the cell. We have the contractile vacuole responsible for osmoregulation and regulation of water content as well. And then here we equally have the food vacuole, which manages issues of nutrition, and the pseudopodium, which is the organ that enables mobility in amoeba. Plural, if I have touched two of these, I will have labeled pseudopodia. Since I have just labeled one, then it is called a pseudopodium, as well as the endoderm, where you have your organelles suspended. It is more granular. The endoderm is granular inner content, while the ectoderm is a less granular outer component of the organism. So here is the shapeless amoeba, unique example of independent cell existing as organisms. Come with me as we look at another example of forms in which living things exist. But don't forget, this is not only the example under this very group. As I said, we have Paramecium, the slipper-shaped organism. We equally have our Euglena, which have the characteristics of both living and of both plants and animal. That was examined in one of our previous classes. We equally have our Climadomonas, Trypanosome, and so on. These are examples of organisms that can be grouped under independent cell existing as a organism. Come with me as we move on to the second example. By the way, just a quick one before we move on to the second example. Permit me to quickly illustrate another diagram of an organism that exists at the single cell level. Yes, so as to concretize learning experiences. Yes. Now, another example I would like to illustrate is the diagram of the Paramecium. Just as I earlier said, it is nicknamed and often referred to as the slipper-shaped organism. This is not difficult to draw. Oftentimes, students get scared and keep wondering, how will I illustrate this? Just come along with me and watch as I do this. Okay, after illustrating your slipper-shaped lines, you come in this way. Okay, as you can see here, I have the diagram of the Paramecium, and then as usual in biology, you know there must be a title. After which comes the labeling, and just like I said earlier when we were looking at the diagram of the amoeba, I told you that labeling is to be done horizontally to the left and the right, or vertically up and down, and then your lines must be drawn with a ruler and it must touch the parts that you are labeling. So a quick one, come along with me as I label. Okay, as you can see, a few components have been labeled. Because of my space, I will try to point at other aspects, components of this organism, and will speak to it. Okay, as you can see here, we have an organelle in here. It is known as the trichocyst. It is required for defense. Okay, it contains secretion with which this organism is able to prey. And then you have the cilium, which is the organ of mobility. You have the posterior contractile vacuole that helps in osmoregulation, that is the regulation of salt and water. Just as we are having the posterior, we equally have the anterior contractile vacuole here, which serves same function. And then the food vacuole, which serves functions with regards to nutrition. You have the dense cytoplasm as well here. And then uniquely, an organism with two nuclei. We have the macronucleus that controls all activities that has to do with the cell, while the micronucleus here control activities that has to do with reproduction in particular. And then you have the oral groove. You have the oral groove, a passage just like gullet in man, through which food passes down to the food vacuole where it is collected, after which it is taken in to serve the organism. Now this is just a few of several other organisms, several other components that can be labeled with regard to this organism. We still have pellicule and so on and so forth. So with this, I believe we can move on to look at another aspect under forms in which cell exists. So we'll be pausing the class here to continue number 2 in our next class. So permit me to quickly say thank you for coming this far with us. Thank you for always joining us on this channel. Thank you for always liking the video, always sharing the video, and always inviting others to join the class. See you next class. Thank you. From the intricate working of the cells to classification of living things, from the mechanism